brothers and sisters, friends, those of you who join us on Thursday evenings for Salem Speaks, welcome. Welcome to another exciting program that we have planned for you this evening. Joining us on this forum this evening once again is Minister Gregory Bethel and Sister Ramona Farkas, and I call them by their church name this afternoon. Mrs. Ramona Farkas Seymour is an attorney at law. Mr. Gregory Bethel is a banker. He has been doing that for many, many years. They're going to be speaking or joining me to speak and discuss the topic this evening, estate planning and the inheritance laws. Last week we had a very exciting and informative program, and this evening it will be no less. I want to say right up front that this is a program that is interactive, and we're asking you to please send your questions in. If you have them already, begin to send them in, and we will do our best to answer any and all of them. Greg Bethel, welcome.
Good to be back. Good to be back, I think.
Good. And Ramona, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And one of us have on a particular color this evening. We wouldn't get into that right now. But we're going to begin this evening. We're discussing inheritance. What are you going to leave behind when you leave this earth? You know you only have a certain amount of time here. And what you do with that time is so very important. What you leave behind for your posterity is hugely important to their success. So before we get into our discussion this evening and questions, and we have a lot of them on the inheritance laws, I'm going to just ask Brother Greg if he would take a few minutes and just go through planning and the future, or planning of your future with the gifts that God has given you, because you can't give anything at the end of your life that you yourself do not presently have. Brother Greg, go ahead.
Well, let's start with the basics. The reality is there are two kingdoms. There is the kingdom of God, which is led by Jesus the Christ. He's the king of that kingdom. And that kingdom is eternal. That kingdom will never, ever come to an end. And for those of us who are followers of Jesus Christ, He's our leader. We have committed our lives to Him, but not only our lives, the gifts that He has given us, we use for Him and His kingdom. And then there's the kingdom of darkness, the kingdom of deception. That's led by Satan and the rogue angels who rebel with him. And thank God, in their rebellion, they lost. They were trying to get the supreme power, but they lost. But nonetheless, theirs right now is the dominant kingdom on the earth. And in fact, most people belong to that kingdom. So, as we use these gifts from God, and these gifts from God are our time, our talents, our thoughts, or our knowledge, the knowledge and the skills, our ties, that's our relationships, and our treasures, our money and wealth, which is what we are focused on. These five gifts, we use them to benefit one of those kingdoms. Now, God's intention is for us to use those gifts to expand and advance His kingdom and resist the other kingdom, the kingdom of darkness. People in the other kingdom, well, their leader tells them, man, don't worry about anything. Man. Don't forget God's instructions, forget God's plan, live for yourself. Enjoy all of what God gives you for yourself. Pursue possessions and pleasure and popularity, travel, have a good time. Enjoy it, man. Don't worry about advancing the kingdom and all of that. And that kingdom really is not eternal. Don't even think about death and dying and all of that. Live for that. Our leader, Jesus the Christ, said, no, not so. One day, you will have to give an account for your time, your talents, the relationships you have built, the knowledge you have acquired, and for your money, for your wealth. And those are given to you as trustees. You are stewards. It's temporary to be used in this first life as a measure of your commitment and your focus and your love. And going into the second life, when Jesus Christ returns to the earth to set up his kingdom physically on the earth, we will participate in that. And we will be rewarded, we will be recognized, we will be given privileges, we will be given positions based on how well we use those gifts in this first life. And that's logical. And when we as Christ followers find ourselves before the judgment seat of Christ, when our rewards and the recognition is announced and our positions and our place, when the kingdom is physically located on the earth, Exhibit A, I believe, is going to be our spending and our giving. How did we spend our money? How did we give? Did we focus on advancing the kingdom of Christ? Did we focus on expanding the kingdom of Christ? Did we focus on resisting the kingdom of darkness? Or were we just engaged in selfish, self-centered pursuit with no thoughts to advancing Christ? Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you are the king of a kingdom and you are setting up your kingdom, would you put people in charge who have a prior history of being selfish, self-centered, in the pleasures, in the possessions, focus on self rather on others? No, I don't expect Jesus the Christ to be that ignorant. So, in our use of our money, in our giving, in our inheritance planning, how we use the money now and who we leave our money to, who we leave our estate to, who we leave our wealth to, which kingdom do we support in our inheritance planning? That's all going to be assessed. And that's all going to be taken into account as we get our new assignment.
I believe I saw at the end in your presentation on this where you talked about three things: give, save, and invest.
Yeah.
Talk about those for a few moments.
So, last week we touched on this a bit. Every time we get money, we've got options. In the kingdom of darkness, man, you just live for now. You just spend on yourself. Right? No. We need to be disciplined. We are representatives of Jesus Christ. We are focused on his kingdom, expanding his kingdom. So, the first thing we want to do is give. Because remember now, that's how we're going to be assessed for our privileges and our position and our rewards and our recognition when Christ returns to the earth. He's going to look at our giving. And he's going to look at our mindset towards giving, our heart, and our focus. And so we want to be giving tithes, we want to be giving offering, we want to be giving donations. All that has to do with advancing the kingdom of Christ, showing the love of Christ to others in our giving. In fact, the way we expand the kingdom of Jesus Christ is, first of all, show the love of Christ, show caring, show compassion, meeting people's needs. And then we share the message of Christ. And we convince them to leave the kingdom of darkness and join the kingdom of light. So giving is a great part of that. In fact, giving is how we initiate contact or access to people. And then after that, you want to save some. You want to save for funding your goals. You want to save for the day when you don't have to go to that 9-to-5 job that prohibits you from doing the work of the Lord and all of those other things. You have emergencies, and then you have needs that people around you have all of a sudden that you haven't planned for it. That's called spontaneous giving. You need to be in position, because remember now, this is what you're going to be rewarded for. You know, Christ always taught about, don't concern yourself with greed. Don't concern yourself with possessions. Life is not about possessions and greed. I am going to judge you for how you dealt with those in need, how you gave. So, if you don't have savings and there's a spontaneous need, how are you going to meet that need? And then you need to be putting aside money for your inheritance. Which organizations are you going to bless? Which of your partners in ministry are you going to bless to carry on ministry? We mentioned last week, when you go to a funeral and you look inside the coffin, you see nothing in there because you can't carry it with you. You leave it behind in one instance, and you want to make sure that it does not get used for the kingdom of darkness. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do. Die, go to heaven, you are a member of Christ's kingdom, but you leave behind all your money and it goes into the devil's kingdom. And so that's why, and we're going to talk about it shortly, that's why you got to have your estate plan and your will, and you got to be careful who you name as beneficiaries with your life insurance policy and with your pension plan. That's what you don't want to be sowing into the kingdom of darkness. So, you know, that all of that is important, and we shouldn't take it for granted. And we should not think God is not interested. I repeat, you are only stewards of this money. God has given it to you to help others and to support His kingdom. And if you don't use the money for the purposes that Christ outlined, then we got a problem. And matter of fact, this is why we have pastors, pastor teachers. You teach us the kingdom way of living, the kingdom way of giving, and the kingdom way of dying. And the kingdom way of living, as I mentioned earlier, it's to show the love of Christ, share the message of Christ. The kingdom way of giving is always others first, expanding the kingdom. And even there's a kingdom way of dying. You don't die and leave all your stuff to the devil. That makes absolutely no sense.
Yes. Thank you very much, Brother Greg. I wanted him to take those few moments to speak to us about that, because the principles of the kingdom that Jesus lays down for us is our guidelines to a successful life. And if you don't have a successful life, it means that you have nothing to pass on to your inheritors. This is what I want to really get across to us, that you do not have anything or much to give if you are not successful in this life of practicing the principles that are going to help you get there. And we believe that practicing the principles that Jesus Christ laid down for us leads to success. And then you will have something to leave behind. Too many of our children and our grandchildren suffer because we as parents have done a poor job of living a life that is guided by the principles of Christ that would give us success so we can pass it on. I want to encourage you from this evening forward to let you know this, that if you are only thinking about making it in this life, you are very short-sighted. As a matter of fact, it is against the word of God. You are supposed to live on and on and on through your posterity. You teach your children to be faithful to the word of God, follow the principles of God. They teach it to their children, they teach it to their children, and so you live on into perpetuity through your inheritors. And that's what I'm trying to get you to see this afternoon. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to have much land that we can get into in a moment. You're not going to have much houses. You're not going to have any money for Sister Ramona and they to decide who will get it.
You know, Pastor, last week you began the program by quoting Solomon in Proverbs. A good man leaves an inheritance, not just for children, but his children's children. In God's plan, we are to be good stewards. We have to develop a good steward to pass it on to, like you said. And then they are to develop a good steward with our assistant to pass it on to, because you keep one good steward, pass it on to another good steward, pass it on to another good steward, and the kingdom of God flourishes, and then God will bless you. God is not dumb, I keep saying this. God is more intelligent than we give him credit for. He's going to bless the good steward who's going to pass it on to the good steward who's going to pass it on to the good steward. Why should he bless a witless steward who's going to pass it on to even more witless and pass it on? That is not God's plan at all.
So please take that advice as we move forward now into another era, another area. And this area that we want to move into, if you sent a question in last week, please have no fear. I have your question. I will certainly pass it on to Sister Ramona Farquharson. But I want to begin, Sister Ramona, by speaking of the Status of Children's Act. Before I get her to speak on that, I just wanted to say this. That last week, I believe I began to get, or to really feel the picture of what is going on in this new act, this new legislation that was passed in 2002, that was helped along by my brother Greg Bethel, and they in February of 2002. It is very clear to me, ladies and gentlemen, that it's important, men, for you to be very careful and to live a godly life. If you're living a godly life, following the principles of Christ and the Word of God, you can get yourself past most of this that we are going to be talking about tonight. Because the law had to be made because the fathers or the men were not behaving in most cases, and leaving the children not properly cared for. And the worst thing in the world is when the government have to fix your problems in the family. You want to follow the laws of Christ so that you can have a successful family. And with that, I want to ask Sister Ramona to talk about this new act, the Status of Children's Act, because I want us to talk about what children inherited, what we would call outside children, before February 1st, 2002. And what are their inheritance, or what are their rights after February 1st, 2002. That is a landmark law that happened in 2002. And we want to make it very clear to children, to parents of these children, what their rights are, because some people are still living, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, as if it were before February 1st, 2002. Saying, well, I'm the oldest child now, and you all stay out of this house because my daddy leave this to me, I'm the oldest son. Well, please get ready to hear some information with respect to that. Talk to us a little bit this evening, Ramona, about children prior, what are children's rights prior to February 1st, 2002, both inside and outside, and then afterwards.
Well, as you've stated, or you've touched upon, prior to 2002, illegitimate children could not inherit unless there was a will.
Right.
Unless there was a will.
Right.
The law did not recognize them in terms of being heirs to an estate.
Right.
Now, that is, of course, in cases of if there was no one else.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and then too, this Inheritance Act, even though people look at it to say, well, the law stepped in, I think in some ways it's a good thing because it also gave some recognition to females.
Yeah.
Because prior to this, a lot of focus was primarily on the males. It was as if the law, the English law, really just regarded the males as being able to handle property and to deal with wealth and the rest, not women. I mean, you can even see here where if a woman somehow acquired an inheritance through a will, her husband in some ways could very well take over. His courtesy was much bigger than her dower. I mean, it was rather peculiar, but that's just the way that our English counterparts, that's how they had it. And of course, our laws closely mirror theirs, the Westminster system, so that's how it was. But since 2002 now, not only do you have a level playing field with illegitimate and legitimate, but also male and female. So no longer can your brother, who may be younger, whom you helped grow up, say to you, oh, no, I am going to be the head. I'm going to be in charge because I'm the oldest male living relative.
Right.
No. Inheritance Act says no level. Children. Sign for.
Now, you know, Pastor, you and Ramona would like to pick on me for being a great supporter of this legislation. But I just want to convince you that I am very biblical. When you go to one of the oldest books of the Bible and you go to Job chapter 42, the Word of God declares Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And the scriptures talk about how beautiful these 3 daughters were. And the Word of God declares that Job gave his 3 daughters an inheritance along with his 7 sons. That's Bible. You go to Genesis chapter 25. Abraham, Father Abraham, well, he had 3 wives, Hagar, Sarah, and Keturah. And the Bible says before he died, he distributed his estate to all of the children, and he separated them. He sent Keturah's sons over in this part of the country, and before he died, he shared with them, and Ishmael got his part. Now, Isaac inherited what we call the birthright. He was the one responsible to become the patriarch and the duty. But, you know, Abraham shared out all the money so that they all, you know, I'm just being biblical.
Well,
I'm being practical.
yeah.
You know, a good man takes care of all of his children.
Yes, Abraham, I think, did the best that he could for Hagar. He did the best that he could for Keturah's children. But the fact of the matter is the promised son was Isaac, who was born by Sarah. But I do understand the need for taking care of this. But I just want to say to Ramona, with respect to females and males being on the level playing field, I believe that over the years they would have abused the patriarchal system because God did not set up the patriarchal system for a man to dominate a woman. He never, when God set out the male to be the priority being of both of them, he always had the female in mind, which means that a man always ought to provide for and cover the female. The female ought never to have the pressures of providing. Matter of fact, females only have this pressure of providing, Ramona, in modernity, in the age when modernism took over and they moved out of countries and came into urban areas. But men's responsibility, that's how God saw that, was to take care of the female. The female ought never to have a pressure of providing. I just thought I'd throw that in there. So the patriarchal system ain't all bad. The patriarchal system was designed to care for a woman, not to abuse or put your feet on a woman.
In fact, Pastor, when the older son got a double portion in the inheritance, he got a double portion because he had the responsibility to take care of the widow, to take care of the sisters, any unmarried sister, any abandoned women in the family. His double portion wasn't for him. it was, as you said, it was for the women who could not take care of themselves because, women were not educated and they didn't work. So my brother, if you are the patriarch now, you get a double portion. All the women who don't have a husband, they are now
become your
responsibility.
Yes.
And that's why God set it up.
Yes, they abuse, but today's world is a
Oh
little
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so all children now we've come to that conclusion. Children, they are on a level playing field, and I really believe that because there were so many families that you found these older male child in the family who was not really living up to anything, and he comes back and he just abuses the father's inheritance and kicks people out and all that kind of stuff. Now my first question, Ramona, for you this evening is this. Question King. If a husband wants out of a marriage, what procedures should a wife follow? Should she apply for a divorce because he said, listen, I don't want to be in this relationship no more, and tries to urge her to apply for a divorce? Okay. And are there disadvantages for the individual who applies? Okay? Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, if the husband wants a divorce, then he should apply for the divorce. But I gather this person is saying maybe the husband doesn't have grounds for the divorce. He just
That's
wants
the next
to be
one.
free.
Because I'm trying. So I don't know if this is just in the United States, right? But we've been seeing this on TV and a lot in the United States that there is this term called irreconcilable differences.
Doesn't exist.
Does that exist there?
No. Divorce in the Bahamas, heavily because of the church, is fault-based. That someone has to be at fault in order to end a marriage. And the grounds would be adultery, desertion of 2 years, immediately preceding presenting the petition of at least 2 years, that you've lived separate and apart for 5 years, immediately presenting that petition, you can prove that we've lived separate and apart for 5 years, or cruelty, which can be mental, physical, financial, or all together, and bestiality, sodomy. Those are the grounds. We look at Section 16 of the Matrimonial Causes Act, and it sets out the grounds. And those are the grounds that you go on. And so in my mind, it's somewhat dangerous if you say that the husband wants the divorce, but is in some way needling or cajoling the wife to apply, because then that comes into the realm then of conniving, because that's a specific thing that you have to swear in your petition, is that we did not connive, we did not collude together in order to bring this divorce. So if he wants a divorce, he must have the grounds. It can't just be that, okay, I want to go off with my sweetheart, I want to live my life, and I tell you I can set you up, but I just need you to apply because I want to move out. Because really it would then be for her to say, well, he has abandoned me or deserted me, and so she can go on that ground.
Right.
But if he has a ground, he should move. Next, you say is there a disadvantage?
Yes, I wanted to, because I'm trying to find out why is he asking her to?
More than likely he's asking her, as we said before, because he doesn't have the ground. She would have the ground because he has left. Or he wants to leave, and she's best because he is probably the one at fault in terms of he is strayed, he wants out. Now, one of the other things that, and Brother Greg can touch on this, I believe this now after 20 years, some people really can't afford to divorce. Because your finances are so tightly woven and integrated with, usually most people have one house, a mortgage, you have 2 to 3 children in school, private school, heading on to college, you've already taken out so many loans together, you've made those plans, really and truly, it's hard. And if you then say, let's say for a man, you get a divorce, how are you going to separate that home? and you can't say, well, okay, let her buy me out. How can she buy you out when the two of you just consolidated and put all your bills together, and then you have one or two more children to get into college? You're not sure they're going to get a scholarship. And so you have to think about your sometimes it really comes down to that. You know, I hear jokingly some men say it's cheaper for me to keep her, or you hear that, but you know, practically speaking, and again, Brother Greg can speak to it, financially, people just, you know, you just can't afford to get divorced. Yes, you can do it, but it makes such a mess of everything. And it sets you back so much further in life financially.
Both parties.
And then, of course, there's a lot of resentment because if you have to tell a child, okay, you have to come out of private school, and because daddy goes or then he gets an apartment, and let's say he has his girlfriend and she ends up getting pregnant, and then everything just changes, and then that's an additional mouth to feed, and then of course when there's separation, a lot of little things creep in. You didn't allow me to have my time with the children, so I'm not going to pay this. And then I'm not going to pay the mortgage anymore. So what happens? It starts falling behind and accruing interest. And then before you know it, the bank is knocking at the door. So in many instances, people talk about disadvantage to divorce. You have to be sure that you can get a divorce.
Right.
And if you are financially in a position where you say, yes, I can take care of the mortgage, if I can deal with these children on my own. This is for the woman, of course.
Right.
If you can say that, I would love the help, but if I have to, I can do it, then fine.
Right.
But you've really got to, I always say to my clients, approach divorce as if you're not going to get anything. I'm not saying that you're not going to, because I'm going to fight for you to get as much as you can. In some instances, if you get everything, we're going to get it. But I'm just saying, approach it from the position as, okay, I'm not going to get everything. Because too, it takes a while. Particularly if it's going to be a protracted fight, it's going to take a while.
Okay, Greg, I want to ask you this question. Everyone was referring to you, because I'm wondering. You said something last week that I don't know if this person is getting at, but that if you as the wife apply for the divorce, then you get nothing when it comes through, or something like that.
I was saying that. Let me just say this first. Biblically, a man is responsible for taking care of his wife financially until she has a sexual union with another man. So you can't get around that if you are a Christ follower. Let me just put that. And a man has an obligation to take care of his children until they leave the house.
Right.
So there is no. So Christians get divorced, but I'm just saying, men, that's your financial responsibility. So you are in it, and you are in it, my brother. And you can't wiggle. Now, when two people are married and everything is going fine, and emotions are positive, the man makes a will, and he names his wife as beneficiary. Okay? And unless he states specifically in the will that her appointment as a beneficiary is intended to be permanent, even beyond divorce, she loses that right in a divorce. Check the act. It is there. And so I was saying to women, if you're going to have a divorce, get a competent attorney. And I was pushing for them to go and see the woman, because you're going to get one bite at the apple.
Right.
Get all you can get. Because biblically, that man have a responsibility to take care of you for life, unless another man come in the picture, and to take care of those children as long as they are dependent and not able to take care of themselves. And the law will support that. Okay? All right? So be very careful. You know, divorce. Listen, the Bible says God hates divorce.
I was about to say that, Ramon, as you spoke about the difficulty of divorce. You know, a lot of people say, man, it's hard to get a divorce. It was intended so.
Well, the church certainly in the Bahamas has it that way. It is fault-based, it's not easy.
But let me say this, because that's one time I wholeheartedly agree, because people need to understand, you know, that choice that they're about to make is very, very serious. That's why God says, as you mentioned with Greg and Malachi, I hate divorce. Because no divorce can be clean.
No.
Okay? The word, the Hebrew rendering of divorce means to tear away.
Yeah.
So to tear the flesh. And that's why people say, Ramona, you can never have a clean divorce because the Bible says it is a tear. And tearing is the most painful process you can go through for your flesh to be torn rather than you getting a clean cut. And it was intended to be that way so that people don't take it lightly. That when you, particularly to now, because you do have offspring that are being affected by what you're going through.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
So we need to be very, very careful that we don't take it willy-nilly.
And in the New International Version of Malachi 2, it states why God hates divorce. And it says because God is looking for godly offspring. And we started by talking about leaving this inheritance for your children's children. A good steward passing on to a good steward, passing on to a good steward. Godly parents passing on to godly children, passing on to godly grandchildren. Divorce rips that apart. Because what usually happens? One parent playing off against the other parent trying to influence the children. Your daddy ain't no good. Your mommy ain't no good. All right, you know.
And the money is, as Ramona said, is being spent.
And then your finances are messed up for life.
Yeah.
The worst thing that can ever happen to a woman is a divorce. A woman who is divorced goes into poverty the very next day. Okay? The very next day. Yeah. Statistics show that. Statistics show that women go into poverty after a divorce. All right?
Not women like Ramona.
No. But Ramona is the exception.
Yes.
Okay? The professional woman who creates her own, who has the ability to create wealth is not the norm. She's the exception.
Right.
And she's the exception because she was in a good church and had good teaching. All of the years
Oh, my
all of the years of her life.
Yeah.
You know, listen, it is devastating on a woman. It is devastating on children.
Right.
But that said,
Yes.
there are
Whatever
times,
you get,
that said, it is necessary, I must say, Pastor, because sometimes people they're just so miserable. You just cannot live
Yes.
together and continue. And I think sometimes you can do more harm
Yes.
to the children with the fighting and the carrying on. And think about it as well. Maybe these people were never equally yoked to begin with.
Yeah.
And that personifies
Yes.
itself so much because so often I see my clients say, well, I became saved and we go to, and he doesn't want to follow. And but they didn't start off that way, but
Yeah.
they're just not equally yoked.
Yeah.
And so it is necessary.
Yeah.
And to say as well, something that's important for the listening audience to know is that when we start dealing with property adjustment, touching on, you say a woman goes into poverty, the law says the starting point is 50-50. They start off at 50% equal for playing field, unless one side can prove to the court why you should deviate from the equal sharing principle. For instance, if you say, well, the house was given, you met me with my house, I built this before you came along, you really didn't do anything. But of course the courts will look at whether or not, how many children does she have? How long was the marriage? What did she contribute to the home? All of these factors play a role.
Right.
And practically, because I deal with it every day, practically, because the women have custody of the children, they get stuck. And invariably, they have to run after the man for money, go to the courts. It is such a disadvantage for women. And I only say that to say, because you often preach this and teach this, Pastor, to young people. Don't go down that road with a broke, ungodly man or a broke, ungodly woman. It cannot end up well.
Yeah, I wanted to, thank you, but I wanted to let Ramona know that I'm not saying that people ought to stay in marriages because, what's that word? I did not say unhappy. I did not say happy, Ramona, because unhappiness is not a good enough reason to get a divorce, right?
Pastor.
Hold on, let me give my biblical views. Now, because if that was the case, right,
I
then
think
when I get
Brother
happy.
Rex was saying 9
Yeah.
moments like a dripping time.
Yeah.
You're really listen.
Okay, hold on. What I'm saying is because someone could be unhappy today and very happy tomorrow. So we can't move. Now I'm talking about situations serious enough
Yes.
where a person is being abused, where a person in any number of instances is being rejected. There are a number of reasons why people ought to get divorced, and I just wouldn't tell you that. Like just you say, okay, well I'm happy with this woman, so I can divorce her. I don't agree with that.
Or I see something down the road, younger, got a better shape.
Yeah.
That.
No, it wouldn't be
Come
fickle.
on.
But
But
you
I'm
know
just
what I
saying,
mean.
yes,
Yeah.
I think we all appreciate
Thank you.
that, lack of conjugal kindness, other things
Yes,
playing a
yes.
part. But,
Yeah.
like, there's some clients who come to me and just say, listen, I just can't take another day.
Yeah.
Not speaking
word
in the
of God
house, we
says
don't
that-
talk. And there's some people who are just miserable.
Yes, I do know that.
That's why the word of God says.
And I must say, sometimes, often it's men.
Yes,
It's miserable.
yes.
And you just,
And we can say the same thing sometimes. But let me say this, let me put this plug in as well. I want to put this plug in because I normally do this to Ramona when people come to me and sit down and we're talking in there about marriage counseling now. We're sitting in there before you make a step.
Yeah.
And we let you know that these are the guidelines that would probably help you to have a successful marriage or not. When you reject them, when you reject the wisdom of God,
Thank you.
these things do happen. And they do make your life miserable because God does tell you when you don't follow His laws, you will be miserable.
Yeah.
And so these are some of the things, but I understand when people can't make it. But please remember that you do have an opportunity when you sit down with somebody and have counseling sessions with them and you get the guidelines. Try your best to work with it. I have a lot more questions, Roma, so if you don't mind, I want to go. One of the other questions that went right along with that question that we talked, that the person asked with respect to their husband trying to get them to apply for a divorce is that we do have a mortgage. A mortgage is involved. So talk a little bit about that. How do they deal with that?
well, if they have a mortgage, or a property, a matrimonial property is involved, you would first of all have to ensure that the conveyance, it's conveyed to both parties, if they're both owners of the property, whether they're joint or joint tenants or tenants in common. More than likely they are, if there's a mortgage, more than likely there's a conveyance, they're both joint tenants. And so you have to now begin to look at getting the house appraised. You want to know what's the market value of that home, and then seek to find out from the bank what is the balance owing on the home. Because you would take the appraised value, you would take away then what is owing to the bank, and that then tells you what is the equity.
Right.
So if a house appraises for $100 and you owe the bank $50, you take the 50 away from the 100, that means there's $50 equity in the home. And according to the law, you start off then with 25 for me and 25 for you.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Good. Let me move quickly to another question. This is a married couple is legally separated. Husband dies, wife comes to the forefront making demands for funds. Husband leaves a will not naming his wife. Does the will supersede legal status of the marriage?
No, because that wife can, pursuant to Section 12 and 13 of the Wills Act, she can seek for some type of financial provision for herself and if there are children involved. And so she can. So even if his will leaves her out and his will deals with other people, she can still move the court within 6 months of either getting the, in this case it would be the probate, the probate, she can move the courts, and because of COVID, a lot of the limitations have been extended. So it can even be, if she shows the court reason why it should be extended, but she can move the courts to say, I need to be taking care of financial provisions, as well as if there are children, even children of the family, children that may not be his, but if he took care of those children, and she can prove that, they too can be taken care of. Children up to 18 or 23, if they're in tertiary education or pursuing any trade that requires them to do so full-time. So that can be done, and the court has to look at all of the circumstances, and the court can order that the net proceeds of that man's estate be dealt, that financial provision comes into play even before any of the gifts are disbursed.
Okay, so you can't, in other words, a man cannot will his wife out of what is due her.
He can, but she can still get around it.
But
she
she
can
can
still
get around
circumvent it.
That's what I'm doing.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the
She
court.
cannot get all of them.
She can't, no.
She
And the
can
court,
get that matrimonial home. She can get support for the children.
and for herself,
All the way
if she
through
can show.
college, and she can get some support
Yeah,
herself.
yeah,
Yeah.
so she-
But she not gonna get the whole.
No, but she has to
The whole
show,
thing, yeah.
and then too, if one of the children is physically or mentally incapacitated, then really and truly, the court, but the court really looks at too, whether they've been separated for more than 12 months. That's an automatic consideration, because then she really has to show why she should get this financial provision if they've been estranged for more than 12 months. And two, they look at her earning capacity, her future. All of these things play a role.
So you're saying that, let's say if a woman is separated from her husband
For more than 12 months.
for more than 12 months and is basically taking care of herself, that has bearing on what she can
Yes,
get.
it does.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it does. It does. Because those beneficiaries, because of course they would then be, I would take it, challenging or objecting to her application, would be able to say, well, she's been gone and she takes care of herself and she works, she doesn't need it. Now they would have a hard time with the children, but, and of course they will raise issues, well, if she has the father of her child that's not his in court, she's going to have a little push to say, well, how is it you're saying he solely took care of the child when you're getting money from elsewhere? So there's a lot of factors to take into consideration.
Is that the reason why, I don't know if this is true in every case, but why most lawyers tell the females not to leave the marital home? Yeah.
I think I do advise my clients, because it becomes more difficult when it comes time to divide that asset, to really prove to the court or to lay out to the court your input to it. Once you're gone, you can't speak as to what renovations have taken place, what has been done, and then two, remember now, judges are human beings, and they're going to think to themselves, well, okay, if you left for home, you clearly knew how you could make it out there, and so why should I therefore put you back or even give you 50% of this home when someone else has stayed and they're carrying all of the bills for this home and really taking it and they're taking care of it by themselves.
Right.
And so I do believe in some way you may disadvantage yourself. However, if it is a case where we can prove that you were forced out because you would be beaten, there's a lot of physical violence, then of course the courts look at it differently.
Okay.
But if you just up and left and said, I'm fed up, then it can become difficult.
And you know, this is why I said last time, get a competent lawyer and act quickly. Don't, do not let time pass. And keep your records.
Yes.
Keep your records. If your spouse beats you up and you go to the doctor for treatment, make sure you got records of that.
And make a complaint.
And yes, don't,
Even if to the Women's Crisis Center, if you don't want to go to the police, but make sure so that someone can
knows.
come and write a report.
Okay.
Or
Now-
your pastor.
Yeah.
Because Pastor Yuda, they will look at that letter as well.
Certainly. So bring it to me, man. What is the importance of each spouse's name to be placed on the conveyance? Let me see if I can put this another way. What if the husband owned the property prior to marriage. He owns it outright. His wife did not help him. And then he builds a house. The advice would be that, hey, listen, woman, if you want to make sure that everything, when things go, when your husband might pass on, so on and so forth, get your name on the conveyance. How does that work? And why is that important to get your name on the conveyance?
Because it speaks to legal ownership. We're putting aside, let's say he built it out of pocket, there is no mortgage. Or if he did use it for a small loan, that loan has been paid off and is satisfied. At the end of the day, if your name is not on that home, then you're not a legal owner. And so when he passes away, he can will that home to whomever. Now, the challenge is this, based on the Inheritance Act, it doesn't matter whether he wills the home to someone else. That person cannot put you out if you are living in that matrimonial home.
And you are the legal, lawful wife.
Yes, you cannot. You cannot be put out. And in fact, there are certain circumstances when you can move the courts to say, this house should come to me fully. You can move the court and make, as Brother Greg was saying, you can make an application and to say why those intended beneficiaries ought not to have the home and it should be given to me. But it is important because too, you don't want to leave yourself in that position. But usually these things happen when you're old. You want to be protected.
And you know, Pastor, let me just make this point for the women who are listening. Shacking up does not count for women. All right? If you are not the legal, lawful wife, you don't get the 50% if he dies intestate.
No.
Now, you can be a child, okay, of a woman who is not wed to the man, and you can get your share. But the woman who is shacking up with no document, to say she is a legal, lawful wife, she is mistreated in all the legislation.
No, there's no common law.
So when you shack up, you lose.
There's a cost for shacking up.
All right? So biblically it's wrong. Financially it don't make sense. And certainly with the inheritance laws, the woman who is shacking up with a man gets left out.
Unless she, of course, unless she's made some major financial contributions to that home, structural, and she would have to prove that. She went to the bank, she got a loan to put on a roof. She did this, and you know, when you fill in the forms, you say what it's for, then you would have to do that, because then you're going to have to move the courts to say, I have a beneficial interest in this home. And he was holding it, in essence, on trust for me, a portion, give me my portion. That would have to happen.
Okay, one more question on the conveyance, because what I'm going to ask a question I know that some women would love me to ask and hear you respond to, is that what happens if I'm married and I am not on the conveyance, and I come to my husband and say, hubby, I think my name should be on the conveyance. What if he say no?
Well, then you know if he loves you.
Okay. You get that? Ramona say he don't love you. If he wouldn't let your name go on the conveyance.
Because that's the ultimate protection.
And
That's the ultimate protection.
This is why you have courtship. You talk about this.
And you shouldn't really get married until he puts your name on it. That's the ultimate gift, isn't it?
You know, you talk about finances, you talk about...
Why would you go in that home on without your name being on that home? You're not protected. His family can come in, they can say and do whatever. You're just out there. No.
But don't you know, Ramona, how these men go, especially this way, hey, my mother will get this, not you.
Well,
I'm saying.
And you know, Pastor, in this era where you have successful professionals who come to a marriage with assets, it's different from our era. We got married, we broke, our wives broke, we struggled together to build a family and to build a home, and we do everything together. It's very different today with this generation, and so they have to be careful. They need to have these discussions and plan and do it properly.
Okay, next question. What could a child do when everybody knows that that's her father? they come and tell her, that's your daddy. But the daddy does not acknowledge or accept you for whatever reason. He's ashamed of doing something. It was a family, situation, and he say, I can't own you.
So that's
Okay?
not your daddy.
Right, hold on. Yeah, but according to them, it's their daddy. The question is, would a DNA be acceptable as conclusive in a court of law that a person is a person's offspring?
Paternity, it's almost very close to an absolute no to be proving paternity after death.
Mhm.
You have to deal with the issue of paternity when that man is alive.
Mhm.
Because for a plethora of reasons.
Mhm.
Because I could go and I say this is his son. And so I take his son there, and then it shows that the two of us have the same daddy. But there's no guarantee that that man was his father. You understand that? There's just so many things that can go wrong. Now, I've heard of a case where somebody said, well, the gentleman left his DNA at a clinic somewhere, and so they want to do this and do... Listen, no.
No.
Whilst he is alive, the people you say told you that's your father, you need to approach that man. Are you my father? If you feel, and he is shunning you or whatever, then you take him to the courts.
Mhm.
You take him. When you turn 18,
You
may
would
wish.
take
Why
a
not?
person.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah,
turn 18.
yeah.
You. I believe you're my father, and I have aspirations to address. For instance, my daddy is a big bank manager, head of Fidelity, Swiss. What? I'm going to take him to court. Take him to court, and then the court can order
A DNA.
the DNA test. And if he turns out to be so, then he needs to come and take care of you up to 23 or the rest of it. And then he is deemed the putative father. That's on record in law.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So
That's
okay.
hypothetical.
Yeah. Now, I want to get into something else before we get into our final questions. Could you explain the role of the administrator or executor of an estate? What powers? I saw some things in there that surprised me. That the executor can actually claim a particular percentage.
Yes. They ought to be compensated for what they have done, their roles. Because sometimes it can be very difficult being an administrator or executor. If you're dealing with a lot of contentious people and if there are a lot of property, there's a lot because you have to manage. Your job is to manage that estate until such time as you are able to disburse it. That means the court has granted the letters of administration, or if it's an administrator, the probate, you have the probate documents, the will has been probated. Once that happens, then you're in a position then to deal with, if it's real property, you can then deal with the deed of assent. If there was no will and you got letters of administration, then it'll be a conveyance of assent to the beneficiaries. And then there's sometimes when you still may be on the hook for a lot longer if you're dealing with, depending on what the will states. You have, the person wants you to make sure that there are monthly or periodical payments to some loved one, a mother, a wife, children, it all depends. And so you could be there for quite a while.
Okay. Another question. Could someone who has been made the executor of an estate, he's about to pass on now, and the father who left it to him, I guess his role should have been to disburse of the real estate, but he didn't do it,
Right.
and he is dying. Could he pass on that executor or administrator to one of his own children?
Yes, it can. In fact, the law states whoever is the executor of his estate will automatically assume the position of being the executor of the estate that he should have dealt with.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It passes his responsibility. And so that's why I always say to people, make sure speak to the person that you wish to put in as the administrator of your estate. The executor or executrix, whatever, and try sometimes for it to be maybe more than one person. Keep them honest. But you need to speak to that person and make sure that they're up to the task. Because some people can just be lazy, lackadaisical. Some people can hoard, keep it for themselves, frustrate your family and your beneficiaries. So try to find the right person. And sometimes it doesn't always have to be your best friend. It may be even a stranger, a person who has integrity, who's out there like a banker or someone who you know will just, not get so caught up in the emotion of it and will just do what has to be done.
Yes. Be very careful with the appointment of the executive.
Yes.
They should be someone who's strong, who the family can manipulate with their emotions. Okay? And it should be someone who wants to dispense with the estate as soon as possible and make the distribution. Because someone who is not a person of integrity knows, look at my, I'm entitled to 2% of the value of this estate every year. Man, I can stretch this out for as long as I am alive because I'm getting a good income out of this thing. So that's very, don't just because someone is you close to someone, that doesn't mean that they...
That may be the best person.
Yeah.
Make sure.
Okay, 2 questions and that we need, or questions I have that we need to clarify before we bring this forum to a close. They want us to explain joint tenancy again and why spouses should desire it. So we want to explain joint tenancy and then to explain tenancy in common. Explain those 2.
Okay. Joint tenancy is where, and I'll use it as by way of an example. We own land, 2 of us. So it speaks to ownership via survivorship. So if you pass away, let's say it's 3 of us, you pass away, your interest, your 1/3, then goes to the 2 of us. So we now, instead of having a third, we now have 50%. We have halves. And all of the property goes to the last surviving person. That's joint tenants. Tenants in common, however, is where from the beginning, from the outset, we already own that property. We own the property in shares, whether equal shares or disproportionate shares. So if it's the 3 of us, we each own a third, or if that document says Greg has 50, Brother Greg has 50%, and we each will share 25, whatever, it is in accordance with what is on the deed, on the conveyance, the indenture. And that's how we own it. And when you pass, you are able to will your share to whomever. In fact, you're even able to sell your portion whilst you are alive to whomever. The difference is with a joint tenancy, I can't sell anything without the approval of my other persons who own as well. It won't be approved. I can't do it. And so that is the key difference in terms of how it is vested, how we own it, and how we can dispose of it. Those are the differences.
And this is very relevant for bank accounts. Money in the bank. Okay? You can be joint signatories with the right of survivorship. Fine. No problem. One person dies, the other person carries on the account, and all of the money is...
Without a probate. You don't need a probate for that.
Okay? You don't. All right? You don't. Matter of fact, you bring a death certificate to the bank and you just move the other name off and you carry on.
Yes.
That's easy and that's fine. Now, when it's tenants in common, then we have to wait for the probate because the other people who are on the account do not have a right to what was yours. And then there may not be any document stipulating, well, how much was yours, how much was yours, how much was yours. So the banker say, you all let the court decide, and when this is probated, then we look at the document and we know who to make this check payable to. Other than that, account frozen.
Okay. So we've got to be very, very intentional about these things. Yeah.
Also with vehicles too. That's a key thing. Always say to people, stop right now. It's not wise to just put a vehicle solely in your name. Because when that person passes, you have a difficult time in getting it licensed and insured without a probate. They've stopped that now. And so be careful with that as well.
Yeah, I need to be careful with that myself. Yes.
As simple as a
Simple as
vehicle,
that, yes,
because it ends up being obsolete. Because if you take 3-4 years, you can't license and insure it. It's just gonna be abandoned.
Especially, and I make this point, especially if you're in a family and you know you all can't get along. If you can't get along in life, you wait till somebody dies. You know,
Yeah.
Big trouble.
you know,
It's gonna be a fight.
if you're in a family where everybody's civil and people get a godly, they can do the right thing, it's less complicated. But if you know you all can't stand each other, listen,
Trouble.
Yes.
get everything done properly.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of a very informative forum that we've had for the past 2 weeks. And before I close, I just want Ramona and Greg to be able to, at this time, I say just give some advice, Ramona, to women out there and to men as to what they ought to do. And this will be both of you. Just give some advice to them as to what they ought to do to try to make life a little less complicated when they depart this side. Because it seems to me a lot of people don't believe they can depart. And then when they depart, they leave a whole lot of trouble here. So whatever advice that you would want to share with them, just go ahead and share that this time, yourself and Brother Greg.
I would certainly say to people, once you reach a certain point in life, be realistic. As you said, you know that death is imminent, it's going to happen. And so you must determine, am I going to make a will? If you decide that you're not comfortable with a will, then I say, give what you have to whom you wish to have it. Because that too can be a very good way of doing things. If you have a piece of property or you've decided, listen, I have 3 children, you work hard and I own 3 pieces of property, may not be your matrimonial home, give it to them whilst they can use it. Don't let them, why should they have to wait until you've passed? If you feel comfortable that they are responsible and they are married, you know, they're doing something with their lives, then hey, give it to them, and again you can decide whether it's joint tenants or tenants in common to make sure that they don't lose it.
Right.
You know, that if you still want to retain some control. But, you know, consider that, but certainly don't bury your head in the sand. Don't be an ostrich. Deal with your affairs so that your passing can be a celebration and not create a lot of turmoil and strife and division.
Thank you, Ramona.
I endorse that 100%. And don't make assumptions about the future. Years ago when Ramona was my Sunday school student, when she was a primary school student, her first couple of years of high school, every Sunday we would debate the scriptures. Little did I know that many, many, many years later, she's an accomplished attorney, now able to do all of my legal work free. It's a good thing, you know. You came into the youth meeting. I was leading the youth department, you know, and I was giving you advice on how to get a good girlfriend. Little did I know that one day you would be my pastor, and I would have to submit to what my pastor said. You just don't know how things will turn out years from now. Don't ever make assumptions. So do the right thing, put it all in order, and live a godly life, and you'll be all right at the end of this life. And you will have stored up treasures that will prepare you for the next life. Simple things. Do that.
And I don't think I have anything, ladies and gentlemen, to add to that. I thank you so very much for joining Salem Speaks. Please join us again next week for another informative topic that we'll be discussing. I thank Ramona Farquharson and Gregory Bethel for being here with us for the past 2 Thursdays. What a blessing it has been. Good evening. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of it.